If hard work was the secret to wealth, construction workers would be the richest people on earth. Sit with that for a moment. You probably know someone who has worked 30 years without rest. Honest, disciplined, never missed a day, and yet they are still checking their account at the end of the month with that familiar knot in the stomach, still watching the numbers refuse to change, still quietly wondering what went wrong. You may be living that story right now. And the most important thing to understand is this: it has nothing to do with how hard you have been working. Science has confirmed what Napoleon Hill wrote in 1938. Your brain has been wired through years of repetition and environment to reproduce the same financial reality it has always known. The wiring runs deep, and it runs automatically, and most people spend their entire lives never knowing it exists. There is a 90-day protocol drawn from Hill's deepest teachings and supported by modern neuroscience that can interrupt that wiring and replace it. Every step of that process will be explained in this video. Stay with it. When was the last time effort alone actually changed where you stood financially? Behavioral economists call it effort-reward imbalance, the damage that accumulates when sustained labor produces no proportional return. But Napoleon Hill identified the deeper layer nearly a century ago. Most people are working inside a mental framework they have never examined, one they accepted without realizing they were accepting anything at all. The trap is not the labor. It is the belief underneath it, the quiet assumption that says, this is how life works, you earn enough to survive, you repeat the cycle. Hill called this crystallized thinking, a state in which the mind has stopped generating new solutions because it has concluded the current reality cannot change. And here is what makes it so damaging. The harder a person works within that framework, the deeper it becomes. Every exhausting week that ends without breakthrough quietly reinforces the story that this is the ceiling. Daniel Kahneman spent decades documenting how the mind defaults to automatic, habitual processing. He called it System 1 thinking, and its defining characteristic is that it reproduces familiar patterns rather than generating new solutions. When that part of your brain looks at your bank account, it does not see a problem to solve. It sees a familiar outcome to maintain. Napoleon Hill wrote that most people are ready to throw their aims and purposes overboard and give up at the first sign of opposition or misfortune. He was diagnosing a neurological default, the brain's tendency to return to the known even when the known is painful, because the known at least feels predictable. Researchers estimate that by age 7, a child's core financial beliefs are already forming. By age 35, those beliefs have become what neuroscientists call default mode networks, the brain's automatic interpretation of what money means and what kind of person you are in relation to it. The hard work trap, then, is an invisible ceiling constructed inside the mind before most people ever had a chance to question it. Until that ceiling is identified and dismantled, working harder only reinforces the walls. In 1938, Napoleon Hill completed a manuscript so radical that his estate kept it from the public for over 70 years. That book was Outwitting the Devil, and inside it, Hill introduced a concept he called hypnotic rhythm. Every human being, through the repetition of thought and habit, eventually falls into a rhythm that becomes the operating frequency of their life. Once established deeply enough, it becomes self-sustaining, pulling decisions, relationships, and opportunities into alignment with itself, whether those outcomes are wanted or not. Hill had no MRI machines in 1938, and yet his description of hypnotic rhythm anticipates with remarkable precision what neuroscience now calls neural pathway consolidation. Every thought you repeat activates a specific sequence of neurons. Each time that sequence fires, the connection strengthens. This is the Hebbian principle. Neurons that fire together, wire together. After enough repetitions, those pathways become myelinated circuits, coated in a fatty substance that dramatically increases their speed and efficiency. Once myelination occurs, the pathway fires almost automatically. Apply that to financial belief. If a person has spent 30 years thinking that money is hard to come by, that wealth belongs to other kinds of people, those thoughts have been myelinated. They are no longer opinions, they are biological infrastructure. Napoleon Hill addressed this through his principle of autosuggestion, which he defined as the agency of communication between the conscious and subconscious mind. He described a method of deliberately introducing new thought sequences at a frequency and emotional intensity sufficient to compete with and eventually replace existing pathways. He wrote, "Your subconscious mind recognizes and acts only upon thoughts which have been well mixed with emotion or feeling. The emotional requirement is not optional, and neuroscience explains why. The amygdala determines which experiences get encoded as long-term memory. Thoughts carried by strong emotion are far more likely to reach subconscious depth. Fear-based financial beliefs are so difficult to dislodge precisely because they were learned under emotional pressure, often in childhood, and that charge drove them deep. To replace them, Hill's method demands equal emotional intensity pointed in the opposite direction. Hypnotic rhythm is the accumulated momentum of myelinated thought. And just as those pathways were built through repetition, they can be rebuilt the same way. At the base of your brainstem sits a network of neurons roughly the size of your little finger called the Reticular Activating System. Every second, your sensory system processes approximately 11 million bits of information. The Reticular Activating System decides, based on what you have trained it to recognize as important, what reaches your conscious awareness and what gets silently discarded. If your subconscious mind has been programmed to believe that financial opportunity is rare, your Reticular Activating System will filter it out when it appears. You will walk past the open door because your brain was never instructed to recognize it as a door. Napoleon Hill called this mechanism definiteness of purpose and argued throughout Think and Grow Rich that a mind fixed on a specific, clearly defined desire begins organizing reality around that desire in ways that seem almost coincidental. When you hold a specific financial goal with clarity and genuine emotional conviction, you are issuing a recalibration instruction to the Reticular Activating System. You are telling it, "This is relevant now. Show it to me." And it begins to comply. This is the foundation of the 90-day protocol. Research from institutions including MIT and University College London consistently points to 60 to 90 days as the minimum window for a new neural pathway to achieve sufficient myelination to begin operating semi-automatically. Hill's prescriptions across Think and Grow Rich, Outwitting the Devil and the Law of Success all converge on the same time frame. The protocol moves through 3 phases. During the first 30 days, the work is identification and interruption. When a scarcity thought arises, the practice is to name it rather than suppress it. Naming activates the prefrontal cortex and interrupts the automatic fear response. This is cognitive reappraisal, a clinically validated technique for reducing the neurological authority of a conditioned thought. During days 31 through 60, the focus shifts to replacement and emotional anchoring. A written statement of specific desire, in Hill's tradition, is rehearsed daily with deliberate emotional engagement. Visualization is added. The brain does not draw a clean line between a vividly imagined experience and a lived one. The same neural circuits engage in both cases. During days 61 through 90, the work becomes environmental and relational. The brain is a social organ, shaped continuously by the minds it spends time near. In this final phase, the practitioner intentionally curates the mental environment around them to reinforce the new pattern. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." Read as a description of what happens when the reticular activating system is recalibrated and new pathways are myelinated. That sentence becomes less of a slogan and more of an accurate account of a biological process. The 90 days are the minimum window the brain needs to make the new frequency self-sustaining. Cognitive psychology identifies the fear of poverty as one of the most persistent and least discussed burdens carried by the modern workforce. Napoleon Hill named it first among the 6 primary fears in Think and Grow Rich, describing its effects as the collapse of reason, imagination, self-reliance, enthusiasm, and initiative. These are not abstract character flaws. They are specific cognitive functions mediated by the prefrontal cortex, and research consistently shows that sustained financial fear measurably reduces prefrontal cortical activity. The very part of the brain most needed to solve financial problems is suppressed by the fear of them. Earl Nightingale, who in 1956 became the first person outside the music industry to sell 1 million copies of a recorded audio program, built his entire life's work on this observation. His answer to why so many people fail when success is available to everyone was a single sentence drawn directly from Napoleon Hill. We become what we think about. Most people direct the majority of their mental attention toward what they fear and what has already gone wrong. The reticular activating system confirms those dominant thoughts. The loop closes. Financial therapists and behavioral economists have documented a pattern that appears with sobering consistency. An individual earns more than their parents ever did, and within 3 to 5 years, through a series of seemingly unrelated decisions, returns to approximately the same net worth position their parents occupied. This wealth set point regression has been observed in lottery winners, bonus recipients, and inheritance beneficiaries. The money arrives and then gradually returns to wherever the subconscious believes it belongs. Subconscious reprogramming is the work of resetting that thermostat. Napoleon Hill's Mastermind principle defined the coordinated effort of 2 or more people aligned in harmony around a definite purpose as a force qualitatively different from the sum of their individual capacities. The neurological correlate of that observation was discovered in the 1990s by Italian neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti, whose team identified mirror neurons, cells that activate both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. When you spend consistent time near people who carry an abundant, solution-oriented relationship with money, your mirror neuron systems are being activated by their patterns. The calibration happens whether you are aware of it or not. Andrew Carnegie grasped this before the science existed to explain it. He did not simply hire talented people. He organized them into a deliberate architecture of minds that extended his own. He once stated that if every factory and every dollar were stripped from him, he would rebuild the entire fortune within 4 years, because his real wealth was the mastermind group. Consider the 5 minds that most consistently influence yours. Not only people you spend time with, but voices you listen to, books you return to, channels you watch regularly. Every mind you consistently expose yourself to is contributing to your neural architecture. Choose with the same deliberateness Carnegie applied to building his inner circle. Andrew Carnegie was asked near the end of his life what he considered the most essential form of labor. He did not speak of production, negotiation, or the grinding work of building an empire from nothing. He said the only work that ultimately matters is the work of thinking. Napoleon Hill, who spent 20 years studying Carnegie and more than 500 of the most successful people in American history, arrived at the same conclusion. The outer world is downstream of the inner world. The thoughts you habitually hold, combined with the emotions you consistently carry, directed by a purpose defined with clarity and conviction, become the invisible blueprint from which your material life is assembled. Carnegie saw steel as the structural future of civilization before a single beam had been sold. Edison treated his laboratory as the arena where imagination became physical. Ford held the idea of the assembly line as a certainty long before the factory floor existed. Hill synthesized 20 years of their testimony into a single law. The subconscious mind, given a clear instruction held with emotional intensity and persistent focus, will mobilize every available resource in service of that desire. The infinite intelligence Hill referenced throughout his work is reached through alignment rather than strain. When the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the mastermind group are genuinely unified around a single definite purpose, the combined orientation begins drawing its equivalent from the surrounding world. The 90-day protocol is the first step toward that alignment, beginning with the identification of crystallized patterns, continuing with the deliberate installation of new ones through autosuggestion and visualization, and completing itself through the intentional construction of a mastermind environment that sustains the new frequency. You were not born into limitation. You were conditioned into it through repetition and environment. And because conditioning is the mechanism, reconditioning is always available. The brain remains plastic across a lifetime. The subconscious responds to persistent instruction at any age. Hill wrote, "The starting point of all achievement is desire. Keep this constantly in mind. Weak desire brings weak results, just as a small fire makes a small amount of heat. Feed the fire every single day for 90 days. If something in this video shifted a belief you have been carrying for a long time, subscribe to this channel. This is a growing community of people who have decided to take their inner life as seriously as their outer circumstances. Every video here is built to translate Hill's principles into the specific challenges of the world you are actually living in. Join us. Bring your desire. That is the only entry requirement. Napoleon Hill left one sentence that contains everything his life's work was built to prove. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Conceive it clearly. Believe it with every repetition, and give it 90 days.